Putin calls Biden's comment nonsense and states that Russia has no intention of attacking NATO. Russian President Vladimir Putin shot down U.S. President Joe Biden's claims that Moscow would strike a NATO member nation if it emerged victorious in the conflict in Ukraine, calling them totally nonsense. Putin went on to say that Russia had zero interest in going to war with NATO. A direct confrontation between NATO and Russia could potentially set off World War III, according to Biden's warning last year. The crisis in Ukraine has caused Russia's relations with the West to worsen than they have since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. Earlier this month, Biden pleaded with Republicans not to obstruct additional military aid, threatening that Putin would not relent and launch an attack on a NATO nation if Russia emerged triumphant in Ukraine. It is complete nonsense, and I think President Biden understands that, Putin stated in an interview that was published on Sunday by Russia State Television. He went on to say that Biden seemed to be attempting to defend his own mistaken policy towards Russia. Russia has no reason, no interest, no geopolitical interest, neither economic, political nor military, to fight with NATO countries, said Putin. When the United States and its allies formed NATO in 1949, it was to protect Western nations from Soviet aggression. The Soviet Union's dissolution in 1991 led to its expansion to incorporate several nations that had been members of the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union. Putin has often used NATO's growth after the Cold War to demonize the West for being too proud to address Russia's security concerns. A declaration that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all is contained in Article 5 of the NATO Treaty. It was Putin's prediction that Russia would be compelled to concentrate certain military units in northern Russia close to the border with Finland upon its April NATO membership. The Cold War, both Westerners and Ukrainians are beginning to wonder how realistic the goals of defeating Russian forces in Ukraine are in light of this year's counteroffensive failure. Russian and Chinese officials have been vocal about their desire to start a new Cold War with the West. Putin responded to a question regarding the possibility of reaching a compromise with the West in light of the opposing rhetoric by saying, "They will have to find common ground because they will have to reckon with us." Last month, an anonymous senior U.S. State Department official stated that Putin will not make peace until he knows the U.S. election results from November. Putin claimed that the West had misunderstood the magnitude of the changes brought about by the Soviet Union's 1991 collapse, which, in his view, eliminated any real ideological foundation for a clash between Russia and the West. "I really did have a naive impression," Putin, a former KGB spy who rose to power in 1999, said in 2000, reflecting on his perceptions of the world. "The reality is that after the fall of the Soviet Union, they considered that they just had to wait for a bid to completely destroy Russia," said Putin. The Kremlin elite claims that the United States seeks to divide Russia, seize its abundant natural resources, and then move on to settle scores with China. Putin portrays the war as a smaller part of this larger struggle. Even though Russia and China are seen as major threats by the West denies that it intends to destroy Russia. Ukraine has made it clear that it will not stop fighting until Russia withdraws all of its forces from the country.